at this point. This is a continuation of the first video, so this is video 2 of 2, dealing with incrementation and then variables and things like that. So at this point, where I've left off, I didn't put this in the first part of the video. When I run the game and I touch this object, it also gets destroyed. So where that happens is something really simple, and in the event sheet, I'm going to add 1 to the counter, and then I'm also going to set the text to the word counter and then the number next to it. But then the third thing I did was, just as an example, I said I want the bell to be destroyed, right? That also means collected. So if you were trying to make a game where you're collecting keys or gems or coins, or collection is a large mechanic in video games. Think of all the games you play that involve collecting things. When you destroy it, the computer just eliminates the use of that sprite. The memory allocation that that sprite was given is completely wiped out and is marked for use for later by something else, right? So I'm not going to have it destroy anything because I want to continuously play with this object. So I'm just going to select the object and press delete. It goes away. All right. So this is kind of where, if you followed the first video, this is the code that you should have. Just to remind you, I said this in the first video. If you hold Control and you hit the scroll wheel, you can change your level of zoom. Maybe you need a lot of code view. Maybe you want to see it up close. Okay. For me, I can zoom in and demonstrate some things to you. All right, but if you're wanting to make your environment look like mine, hold Control and press the wheel on the scroll and scroll it up and down, okay? All right, so at this point, the player collides with the bell, the number 1 for counter goes up, and then the value gets reported out to the label or the text. So let's do something with the horn. So I'm gonna do the same thing, action, add 1 to something, okay? Let's subtract. So unlike in some computer languages, you would add a negative value to something. Construct actually has something a little bit easier to initially understand, and they literally have subtract from. And when you see these global variables, that means obviously the stuff that it's going to impact here. So look at the little global icon. It's green, and this one over here is green, so they must go together. So we're going to subtract from, what are we going to... We're going to subtract a certain amount of value from counter 1. So once again, I'm going to do it by 2. So we're going to subtract by 2 and say done, where this one's going to go up by 1. And then we're going to add a third thing, which is the terrain. Because when you jump in the air, you're off the terrain, and then when you land, you can collide. So the question is, can we do something else to manipulate numbers just for the sake of you seeing how we can try other things? Sometimes when we land on the ground, maybe we make a game where it keeps track of how many times you land on the ground, which limits the numbers of times you can jump. And if you land on the ground 150 times, the game's over. And the challenge is to get to the goal with less than that. But you don't report out to the user, but you're just privately keeping track of the numbers of times we hit the ground, right? Maybe you got to keep track of stuff. Right? Maybe you're keeping track of the numbers of times the player used a specific weapon or technique. And then when a number has reached, you do something to the player, right? To make it worthy, right? So we're going to right click and insert a new variable. And we're just going to call it, I don't know, landings with a capital L. Landings. That's the name. We're going to start with 0 because when you start with the game, you haven't landed yet. You're standing on the ground. So I'm going to say OK. And now I'm going to add an event for the player. And then it's on collision. And now one of the things I said in the first part of the video, it's hard to come up with the phrase for what you actually want. So the word on collision with another object, that phrase, you could have understood it as when it touches something. Well, you're going to go look for when it touches something, and it's not going to be there. So the challenge about this language is finding the phrases that match up with the things that you want, because this is specific to Construct 2. It's not specific to another language like Java or Python or C++, right? So every language has its own learning curve. So on collision with another object, what are we going to collide with? Well, we're going to do the terrain. And I'm going to say OK. and say done. So what do I want to have happen if I touch the terrain, meaning I collide with it? I'm hoping it doesn't bug out on me because it starts touching the terrain. So we'll see. So we're going to add a system operation, and it's going to be add to. We're going to add to a variable. So I'm going to drop down the variables, and since I have 2 listed up top, I have 2 listed in this list. So I'm going to select the correct one I want it to be done to, and I'm going to keep it as 1 because I want to incrementally keep track, incrementation. And I'm not going to keep track of this by the public side at the moment. I want you to understand how to use the debug menu. So let's run the game, and let's just see. Let's see if it not bug out. So this works, this works, this works. I'm going to come over to here. We didn't code this to do anything yet, but I am touching the terrain. So there should be a value in terrain that I can't see, right? So let's use the debug menu to see the difference. So we're going to close that. Oops. Oops, oops, oops. Too many things. All right. So we'll go here, and under home, there's a little bug. And over here, there's a little bug, and they're the same button. So when you click them, you're going to get a bigger window with a bunch of data on the bottom. And then you're going to see landings, as I suspected. I am colliding with it currently. And as I suspected, without knowing this in the debug menu, right, I would not know. So currently, landings is going up. Why? Because I'm currently standing on the platform. I'm colliding with it. It's not like a once and done thing. So we learned that the debug menu can tell us things that we did not share out to the player. Okay? Counter hasn't changed because I'm not crashing into it. So if I were to, let's see if I can get this whole thing into view. I'm not sure how this is being captured. All right? So that's working. But let's go down to variables. I'm jumping in the air at the moment, so look at the number of landings. As I press up, it pauses because I'm not touching it. So anyway, I wanted to just demonstrate that. So this might not be the best thing. So I'm going to close my debug window. I'm going to go back to the event sheet, and I'm going to just get rid of when player collides with the terrain. Maybe let's change this. Let's double-click terrain, change it to the horn. So this actually, let's see here. We got subtract 2 from counter 1. Horn's already being done. Let's just cancel it all together. We don't need it. So I'm going to click on this entire thing. If you click the left side margin of your conditions, it'll select the entire thing, the condition and then the action that occurs. Just press delete on the keyboard. It goes away. So this demonstrates how to delete code as well. All right. Now let's run the game. That's not the game. Sorry. Too many tabs open. Run the game. At this point, I have this, right? Counter's going up. But what about when I hit this? How come this isn't changing? I hit it 3 times. Now watch the number 6. Changes to 1. How did it change to 1? When I go over to here, nothing's going on. I want you guys to think about this right now. Go over to here, hit this. Now it's -8. What's going on here? Now watch. This is starting to go down towards the positive. Now I'm in the positive. I'm going to come over to here and hit this. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to come over to here and hit this. Now it's -4. What's going on here? I know what's going on. I want you to know. Mike?
Sometimes if you hit the red block,
Yep.
when you first hit the yellow block, that's how much it subtracts.
Say that again?
When you hit the red block, it subtracts a certain amount. When you hit the yellow block.
That's what it appears, right? Because I'm at 1 right now. If I go over to here and hit this, something happened that I don't know what happened. If I go over to here, it's going to be 1 less than what it really is right now, okay? So if I go over to, now it's 0. So I hit it twice. It went down by 2. Nothing is being told to the user that that's happening. Why? Here's the main point. We forgot to tell the user what's going on with the label. So this operation of set the counter to the label and then the variable, we just have to hit control, drag it down, and add it to here too. Now it makes a little bit more sense and it won't be confusing. So this was just a quick demonstration to making sure you let the user know what's going on. right? So this goes up by 1, this goes down by 2. Now you can clearly see it, see? Up by 1, down by 2. Up by 1, up by 1, see now it's 2, now it's 0. Now it's -2, now it's -4. Now it's -3 because this goes up by 1, right? And maybe if this were a game, I'd put a +1 here and I'd put a -2 here for some puzzle reason. Maybe they need to know that, okay? So that's one other thing, and I want to show one more thing in this video so that it's there. I'm going to add a third variable. Let's first change actually, no, we have landings. Let's change landings name to something else. I'm going to double click landings, and I'm just going to call this counter 2. Why? Because it doesn't really mean anything, so I'm just going to call it counter 2. So now, when I touch the bell, we're going to add 1 to counter 2, but we're also going to take a system, and then we're going to subtract from counter 2. So we're going to add to counter 1. At the same time, we're going to subtract from counter 2. I'm going to say done. I'm going to drag this here because I want the system operations to all happen before labels get updated. Now, there is no such thing as a counter 2 label. So let's go back to layout and make a text area for counter 2. So this is review again from the previous video, but we right click, insert new object, scroll down to texts. I'm going to call it counter 2. I'm going to say OK or insert. I'm going to get a general text field when I single click. And on the left properties, the value for text is text. I'm going to call this is the static string, the string that doesn't change. Counter 2, colon, space. Okay? So now I have this. I'll put this here. All right? And now we have an object called counter 2. That's text. And we can go over to the event sheet and say add action for counter 2. And then basically set, that's the key word, set text to what? So this is where we type in the static string. Anything we want to never change ever, it's not going to vary, goes in the quotes. So I could write ables here if I wanted, and ables wouldn't change. For the sake of the video, we're going to put ables here. Ables. Ables. Did I spell that right, able? Okay, colon, space. We're going to find out how many ables we got. Now we're going to pull in that variable, and how we pull in a variable is you start with an ampersand, shift 7, then you start typing the variable that you see up here. So I'm going to type in counter, C-O-U, and I'm going to look for a green globe that matches the green globe here that has the same thing I'm looking for, counter 2. I'm going to say done. Oop, it didn't work. Let's try this again. Double click. There. So ables is getting joined to the variable counter 2. All right? And counter 2 is going to have 1 subtract to it every time I hit, or counter 2 is going to have 1 subtracted from it every time I hit the bell. So I'm going to say done. And now, let's just go to the horn. I'm going to take counter 2s. I'm going to drag this down to here. That's an update. Update is general purpose. We can use it down here. It updates the label. And then this system, subtract from, for counter 2, I'm going to bring it to here and change it to add. I held control and I dragged. So now if I double click this, I can click back and say add to. It's already got the value. I'm going to say done. All right, so at this point, I'm subtracting 2 from counter 1. I'm adding 1 to counter 1. I'm subtracting 1 from counter 2. And so forth. So let's just see some changes happening, okay? So I'm going to click the run. And let's just see if it works. If you notice, counter 2 doesn't have a 0 next to it because I didn't put it in the initial static string of the text value. So that goes up, but look at that. So this is going up, the other one's going down. I'm going to go over to here. The other one's not changing. Right? So you'd have to go back in the code, but I'm just using this as an example to basically get you to have values being changed. Now I'm standing on top of it. Look at all the ables now. We're going down. We're going up in counters, we're going down in ables. Right? And then this isn't doing something to the other one. So when I hit the horn, I want to know, like, is there anything going on that maybe I didn't report out? So what's going on? So let's close this, find out. When I hit the horn, counter 1 is going to get updated. Counter 2 is going to get, so right here, I'm subtracting and adding from counter 1. I'm not doing anything to counter 2, so counter 2 clearly doesn't need to be updated because it never changes. So most likely I made a mistake. I'm going to double click counter 1, and I'm just going to drop this list down and change to counter 2 and say done. That's how easy it is to debug and change as long as you think. That's the critical component, thinking. So let's bring this over and let's see the difference. Now this is impacting both, and this is impacting both in a different way, right? Let's see. Right? So at this point, once again, ables could be an abstract example of agility or points or anti-points or things that you are wanting to keep track of and let the player know or not know, right? And so for variables that you don't show the user, you want to use the debug menu so you can see what's going on. And then once again, last thing, when I hit Control R, counter 2 doesn't have an initial 0. That is repaired by going here and just changing the value to just have that 0 temporarily shown to the user. That is not an intelligent 0. That is a once and done 0. It's just there to make you know that you have initially starting at a 0, okay? So that's pretty much it. That concludes this. This is an abstract demonstration of how to use variables and just adding and subtracting. But you can use other mathematical operations. Star is for multiplication. Slash is for division, right? Shift 6 would give you that exponential symbol, right? You can do Shift 6 and then 8. It would be to the power of 8. I believe you can call sine, cosine, tangent. You could do a bunch of varieties of things related to that. You can even use radians. You can use all kinds of really interesting mathematical operations and artifacts within the code, okay? And you just literally type it that you would normally write in your TI-83, and it would do it, okay? So when you're dealing with circles and things, degrees might not be precise enough, right? Because 360 of them isn't really that precise. So you might want to use something besides that. Okay? So that concludes the video. It's going to be a video that's saved in the Google Classroom, and I'm going to expect, obviously, that you